Welcome back to SheCan, where role models inspire by telling their stories and sharing their insights and lived experiences to guide all of us others. I'm so excited to have Anjali Mehta today. Anjali, welcome to SheCan. You're a human rights and humanitarian lawyer. You're the co-founder of the non-for-profit What is the Power of We? You're a storyteller on a mission to climb the 7 summits to raise funds and mobilize a community around gender-based violence. You're a strong believer that transformation happens together, which we couldn't agree more with at SheCan. You're a TEDx speaker, a speaker in general, a dancer, an athlete. Anjali, and you work at the intersection of women's rights, gender-based violence, art, and law. And you do that in India, in the UK, in Colombia, in Brazil, and Chile, and other places. You represent foreign governments in human rights cases before international courts. You achieve asylum for asylum seekers that are persecuted on the basis of their gender. And you work on constitutional rights cases to protect the rights of transgender girl athletes in the US. Anjali, tell us a bit more about yourself and those pivotal points that you feel took you to where you are today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that very generous introduction. Yeah, absolutely. Look, my journey into becoming a lawyer and a storyteller, even a human rights lawyer, and in that space has been building up for a long time. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do in life, so I think, there's a motley of activities. You've listed dancer, storyteller, and I think all of these things are connected by the idea of storytelling, whether it is through dance, whether it is through the law, whether it is through the mountaineering work that I'm doing right now and survivor storytelling. Everything that I've done has been centered around this idea of telling stories. I am a storyteller by nature. I grew up dancing. That's my first love. It's the first activity that I was put into, and I can credit my mom for that. She really wanted to live vicariously through me. And so when I was about 2 or 3 years old, I think she put me in my first dance class and put me in specifically an Indian classical style of dance called Bharatanatyam, which is focused on storytelling. And so since I was 4 or 5 years old, I have been using dance as a way to tell stories. Across the board. And I think that then took me into this world of starting to question, whose stories am I telling? Am I telling my own stories? Am I telling the stories of others? How is that working? Where do I want to be telling stories? And so ended up then kind of studying abroad, and my first experience with storytelling in the law was in Chile, and had the incredible opportunity there to work with survivors of the Pinochet regime who had been sexually assaulted during their time in detention for being opposition to the Pinochet regime. And we were working with them to create a new law that would include sexual assault as a form of torture. And it was this moment of recognition that, yes, dance is this incredible form of storytelling, for sure, but also hearing people's stories and translating them into some sort of legal framework is really transformational, is really impactful, and actually is a form of storytelling in and of itself. These are stories of women whose stories had never really been told, had never really been spotlighted, and being able to bring these stories to the United Nations and being able to bring these stories into, the halls of government in Chile's legislature was a huge pivotal moment for me, kind of a moment that I decided, okay, I think I want to do storytelling in the legal space. And then that took me on the whole journey through law school and through the big law process, and now leaving the corporate law world, taking a step into advocacy and really focusing on the storytelling for survivors part of the work and of the advocacy work that we're doing, which is what I'm doing with What is the Power of We?
Anjali, so tell us a little bit more about these key takeaways that you learned being a humanitarian lawyer your if you look back, the sort of main learnings that you will take into your advocacy work?
Listening is the most important tool that we have. A storyteller, and the emphasis there is on telling, but actually the reality is, as a storyteller, the most important tool that we have in our toolbox is listening and really hearing what others are saying and the stories of other people. So I would say my biggest takeaway is that it is far more important to listen and to hear than
Mm.
to speak.
Anjali, and I often think we have a lot of younger girls listening to these conversations. And when did you think, obviously you had an incredible experience in Chile, and you were working on the cases of the women that had been sexually abused as a form of torture, which happens in wars all the time, and that informed your decision to become a lawyer. But I'm sure that there are many girls listening that think that the one thing that we all can do is we can change laws. And with the law, we can defend people that need defending, and we can put a lot of rights, a lot of wrongs right with the law. When did you always think that that could be something you're interested in? I mean, you're a Fulbright scholarship grantee. You must have been very good at school. Tell us a little bit about that journey that you thought, I can do that. This is what I want to do. This is what matters to me. This is how I want to matter.
Absolutely. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, is I have this motley kind of array of interests. And so, there are some people who grow up knowing, I want to be a lawyer. This is what I want to do. I want to, protect people's rights. I want to have an impact in this way. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until quite late in the game, I would say, for me, for what I was
Mm,
seeing around all of my peers. They were very clear, I want to go work in government. I want to do public policy. I want to be a journalist. I was like, I think I want to be a professional dancer. I think I want to go and tell stories and dance and use that as my way of having impact on the world. And I guess I would say that it was a step-by-step journey, and kind of I am constantly asking myself every day, to this day, is what I'm doing right now in line with the passion that is driving me?
mm,
Am I in line with the things that excite me, the things that light me up? And the answer could be yes today, and the answer could be no tomorrow. So I definitely had a moment where I thought, okay, I want to be a professional dancer. I joined a dance company in India, and it's a social justice dance company. And I thought, yes, this is what is lighting me up. And it did for a 6 to 8 month period. And then I woke up one day and I was like, you know what? I think I want to have a different sort of impact in the world. Let's find out what that could be. And I think just being open to following your gut and being open to following your passions and the
mm.
things that excite you, because those do change, and kind of tapping into that on a regular basis, and continually questioning, okay, am I on the right path? Am I doing the thing today that is making me happy? Has been kind of my guiding light as I've pivoted from, dance into the law as a form of storytelling into advocacy.
Anjali, so tell us a bit more about what is the power of we? What is your big vision? What are you trying to achieve?
Absolutely. So when I was working at this big corporate law firm, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of incredible human rights lawyers and a lot of incredible women's rights lawyers, just amazing women in the space. And I remember this is just my most vivid memory of right as I was deciding it was time to leave the corporate law firm and move into advocacy. But I was wondering, what is my value add in the advocacy space? There are all of these incredible people who are doing incredible work. What value do I bring to that space? And I was having a conversation, multiple conversations at a conference with these incredible women's rights advocates and lawyers, and they were burnt out. Our conversations were all around burnout and fatigue, isolation, not having the resources to fund the work that they were doing, not necessarily having the connections to each other in a constant and reinvigorating way.
Mm,
And it was my aha moment of, oh, okay, I think I could be a value add here. I have energy. I have the ability to potentially connect all of these incredible advocates and organizations in this space. Let's see what we can do with that. And so when I left, the goal was basically to build a coalition of organizations, of advocates, of survivors who were all working towards the same goal, right? Which is combating gender-based violence, and all doing it in incredible ways, but also feeling those effects, the isolation, the burnout, lack of resources. And so this has evolved essentially into my major goal, which is creating a global digital hub that would serve as this online platform for these organizations and advocates and survivors to connect with each other in real time, to share resources in real time, to be able to collaborate in real time, and essentially start solving for some of those problems of burnout and isolation that many, many, many advocates who I had been speaking to were. And so we're building that with all of these organizations, all of these advocates, and together we're coming up with some sort of platform that we hope will be a real game changer in this space to actually be able to redistribute funding, to redistribute toolkits, to kind of, stop reinventing the wheel over and over again when we can actually lean on each other in a really bold way. So that's the big issue that we are solving for at What is the Power of We? And over the next 3 years, we're collecting these organizations and we're building this network by traveling. And a very interesting replacement for a fundraising gala, which is I'm climbing the highest mountain on each continent to tell survivor stories and amplify the work of our organizations, of our partner organizations who are working on the ground to combat gender-based violence, and yelling from the tops of the highest mountains in the world to amplify their work and to fundraise for them in the meantime. So it's this kind of short-term vision of collecting all of these organizations and building this technology from the ground up, and while doing so, really putting a spotlight on the issue of gender-based violence, replacing the traditional fundraising gala with mountain climbing.
Anjali, you're amazing. This sounds so amazing. I'm so impressed with your big vision. I think we are reinventing the wheels in lots of different areas in the world. And when someone comes along and tries to connect and collaborate and put people together to share those resources, I think that's a win-win situation. So what changes do you think we need to see in the world to keep girls and women safer? And, this is a very difficult subject, I think, because as women, when we speak to each other, we seem to always agree. And when we speak to men about this, it gets a defensive conversation. But the fact is that most of the cases of violence against women is by men to women. And that is not to say that we are condemning all men or that we are, God knows what. We are trying to make the world a safer place for our next generations, most importantly, Anjali. So what is your vision here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we need to have more inclusive conversations from an earlier age. I think it comes down to education, and I think
Mm,
it comes down to including boys and men in these conversations as early as possible. And I think it's really only then, because you're right, when we speak with other women, we're all in agreement. Okay, these are the issues, these are the big problems. How can we work towards a solution? And a lot of times I think men and boys are left out of the conversation, which in turn can lead to even more isolation, even more of this, you know, movement, polarization, I guess I would say. And so I think the real solution comes from early education, starting to talk about equality and gender equality, and starting to talk about things like consent, and just from a very, very early age, and having those conversations with boys and men as well.
yeah. Anjali, so have you seen anywhere in the world where that's practiced and it's done well?
Oh my gosh, I wish there was, I wish there was a great example of this. I guess I wouldn't say there's a region or a country or, that's gotten it down. But I would say that there are communities of people who are working to include boys and men. And I know in the UK, for example, there is a huge push to include men and boys in the conversation. And it's kind of starting at a later age, I would say, but that is still a huge push that is happening. And I think that's extremely commendable and extremely necessary. I was also on a call last week with a group of incredible students in India.
Mm.
And that was their big takeaway was let's move towards a model where we are including men in this conversation. And the whole conversation was, it was 40-60, I would say, 40% men
Amazing.
students
Mm.
and 60% women. And it was a great way to just start the conversation and start including men in these conversations. And it's happening. It's definitely happening. I'm not sure there's anywhere where it's gone the full, it's run its full course where I could say, oh, this is a true success story. But the fact that it's even happening in the first place to me is a success, right? It's, it's communities in the UK that are doing this work. It's communities in India that are recognizing that this is the next step and this is how we actually move towards impact. And I think it is absolutely happening.
Anjali, so if I understood this correctly, in order to finance What is the Power of We, you are going to climb 7 summits. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Your
Yeah.
mountaineering, incredible explorer vein that you seem to have is going to finance this non-for-profit that will bring all the advocates and the lawyers and the survivors together to share resources. Tell us a little bit about how did you come up with that? How did you become a mountaineer? How did you think this is what I'm going to do? This is what well, how can I do that even? I mean, the mere thought of it gives me immediate anxiety.
Well, absolutely. It's a great question. Well, first of all, I am excited. You are absolutely welcome to join us on one of our group expeditions, and we would love to have you. Just planting the seed. I'm planting the seed now. It's an open invitation. But no, I got into backpacking and climbing mountains actually because of my mom. She was an avid backpacker and picked it up when she was in college. And so all of our kind of family holidays, we wouldn't really do the beach or the relaxation sort of thing. We would always go on a backpacking trip and we would climb a mountain, and that was what our family holidays used to be. And so I grew up in that environment of really learning how to love the outdoors and be in the outdoors and learning how to love pushing myself physically, really finding those physical limits and learning how to stay strong, how to overcome that mental barrier of, oh, I can't do this. Actually, one foot in front of the other. Yes, you can. And that's something that my mom absolutely instilled in us. And then I think I just took it to that next level. My idea for kicking off this, we're calling it Survivors to Summits. It really kicked off because I was turning 30 and I was in my big corporate law firm job and I was craving some time away. And really, in a corporate law firm context, the only time you get really without having to work, even if you're taking a holiday, is when you have no signal and no way for anybody to reach you. No way to check your email, no way for anyone to reach you. And so I thought, I'm turning 30. I don't really want to do a big party with everyone. That feels really intimidating to me. Let me book a mountaineering expedition, do something to challenge myself physically, and let's see what happens. And so I booked a 3-week expedition to climb the highest mountain in South America. It's called Aconcagua. And I told all of my, friends and colleagues, it's like, I'm gone, I'm off the grid for 3 weeks. Don't bother me. I'm going and doing this crazy thing. It's my my millennial midlife crisis, if you will. I need to sort out what being 30 means by going and climbing this mountain. And I am a survivor of sexual assault. And being on that mountain unlocked healing for me in a way that I didn't even know that I needed. It was this incredible heart opening mountain for me, where I recognized, I was able to move into my power. And it really felt that way. Kind of every step I was taking up that mountain felt like I was stepping into my power in a way that I had lost after I was assaulted. And it was this incredibly powerful, empowering feeling of, oh my goodness, I am stronger than I ever thought that I was. I am the only one who has underestimated myself. And then we got to about 5,500 meters. There's a camp there. And as we were preparing to move on to our next camp, I witnessed an act of violence against a woman on the mountain. I was packing up all of my gear. I was getting ready to move, and all of a sudden I heard this kind of blood-curdling scream outside. And I came out of my tent and I saw that another group that was sharing the camp with us, the guide had an ice axe in his hand and had just hit this woman, and she was on the ground, kind of cowering. Her hands were up by her face. And it was just this moment of recognition that I might have come to the mountains to escape, to have some sort of time away from real life. But the reality is that the mountains are just another reflection of society in every way. And this was kind of that moment for me of recognizing that. And so when I was deciding how to go about raising funds and, meeting partner organizations and how to go about doing this work, I thought that there was a real opportunity to not only, take that duality of the mountain, right? That it is a reflection of society, and also was so, so, so powerful for me personally as a survivor, and tie that into it. And that's where the mountaineering expeditions came into this world.
Anjali, it's incredible. I'm very inspired by you because you said so many important things. And I think one of those important things is that I am stronger than I ever thought possible. I think this is so often a thing that we forget how strong we are. And when we undergo these physically straining things, we understand that really we are so much more powerful. So I love that you are role modeling that. And I love that you're using that to raise money. Now, tell us about the raising money. How much money do you plan to raise? How is this going to work? How can people contribute so we can put that out there?
Absolutely. So this year, the goal is to raise $35,000. I am going to Antarctica in December to climb Mount Vinson. That's the highest peak on Antarctica. And the goal is to raise $35,000 for frontline organizations whose federal funding has been totally decimated here in the United States.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we're really starting with those two organizations because they're close to my heart and they're close to my co-founder's heart. One is Saki for South Asian survivors, as a South Asian survivor myself. One in two South Asians in the New York area are survivors of gender-based violence. 50% of the South Asian population here is a survivor of gender-based violence. And the YWCA Chicago is the other organization that's providing frontline services, namely their rape crisis hotline and their advocates who show up as soon as someone goes to the hospital and is requesting a rape kit, for example. They show up to the hospital. They're there, they're supporting, they advocate for that person, and they make sure that that person is heard, that that person is taken care of, and that that person feels safe. And so those are two organizations whose funds have been completely decimated. They've really had to pare down the services that they offer. And so we're hoping this year to be able to bridge the gap, fill that gap that federal funding freezes have caused. And so for each summit, we'll be highlighting two or three of our partner organizations that we'd like to contribute and raise money for so that they can continue their really incredible and important work. If you'd like to donate, the way to do that is on our website at www.whatisthepowerofwe.com. And there's a donate button, and there's a whole process you can go through on that page. But that's the goal for this year. And as we work towards, what's funny because the larger technology is almost a social enterprise. It feels like I'm getting into the tech world a little bit. So we're also, it's important to me that 100% of our grassroots donations go towards survivors. They go towards the frontline organizations and they go towards really impacting the lives of survivors. When it comes to our big technology, we are going to be pitching to VCs, we're going to be pitching to, larger companies and corporations for the funding for that. And so I think, we're very specific about where funding goes and where our funding sources come from and where that money goes to. So really looking at the corporate angle for the big technology, and then grassroots funding really 100% going towards the frontline organizations doing the work on the ground.
Anjali, I'm shocked by this number that you just quoted. 50% of South Asian girls and women in the New York City area have experience with sexual abuse. That's shocking, and I'm deeply saddened by this data point. And I know that a lot of funding has been cut, and we all know it. And I am so proud of you for stepping up. And I think that's exactly what is needed from really everyone. So how do you feel each one of us can be part of transformative change here?
Yes, I love this question. I love this question. And I think it is such an important question because there are many things that each of us want to have an impact on in the world. And it can feel really overwhelming to think, I want to do something, but what can I do? And if I will direct everyone, there's a social change framework that Deepa Iyer has created. And I think it's such a beautiful way of describing the fact that every one of us has different strengths that we can tap into when it comes to social movements and when it comes to transformation. And so I think it's a matter of first actually stepping back and having a reflective moment of what are my strengths? Where do I see myself fitting in? And her framework is really helpful, but just for a brief overview, it's a question like, am I a storyteller? Am I an educator? Am I a healer? Am I a guide? Am I a frontline responder? What sort of role do I feel that I can take on? And then when you kind of figure that out, it becomes a lot easier to take the next step, right? Which is, okay, now I'm a storyteller. What are the stories that I need to be telling in order to have some impact? Okay, I'm a frontline responder. Where am I needed? Where do I need to physically place my body in my community to make sure that I can be there for people when needed? I'm an educator. Okay, what tools do I have at my disposal? Is it social media that I can use to educate? Is it having a conversation at the dinner table with my family? That is the role that I'm playing. And so I think it's kind of going step by step, one step at a time, as I say, is my mountaineering. It's my mountaineering mantra and it's my life mantra, one step at a time. And first reflecting, kind of understanding where our strengths are, what roles we can play, and then taking the next step and thinking, okay, how can I then take that role into my community in a way that then can have impact?
Yeah. Anjali, I think the really important thing is that each one of us can lead by example by figuring out what is important to us and then giving a little bit of the time that we have to something that we care about, such as gender-based violence, right? We can have jobs, we can have families, each one of us can lead by example. We all have that power. And that, I think, is the intrinsic importance in SheCan to show that, because we often don't consider ourselves as role models or as leaders but you lead with what is important to you. And just by getting a little bit of clarity on what that is, to then stand by that, we can vote with our voice, we can vote with our money. If we align ourselves to the things that matter to us, we can be very powerful, and each one of us is very powerful. And you're showing that so beautifully. Anjali, I'm wondering, how in the world does one prepare for this challenge that you set yourself, both physically and mentally?
Great question. I would say that the mental preparation is far more important than the physical preparation, which is, perhaps a surprising thing to say. Um, there is always these expeditions are always difficult physically. They're always difficult physically, and they are then always difficult mentally. And I think training myself to recognize when I'm feeling the difference between when I am feeling, oh, I can't do this because I don't think that I can,
Mm,
versus I can't do this because maybe this is now bordering on dangerous is the is the line that am learning how to draw. And that is what that kind of is coming with experience. And so I just spent a couple weeks out in Peru. It was a great training opportunity and a great mental training opportunity as well. And really recognizing that most of my mental I can't do this is coming from the because I don't think I can side of my
mm,
brain,
mm,
not the because this is a gut feeling telling me that I need to be turning around because this is actually dangerous. And so recognizing that and now taking that into my training at home when I go to the gym and I have to do very hard things and lift very heavy weights and kind of train to build up strength and train to build up endurance. And kind of when I start thinking, oh my God, I can't do this, recognizing again, training my brain, no, this is because this is the part of your brain that's saying, I can't do this because I don't think that I can. Let's overcome that because actually you can. You can do it.
Anjali, and do you have any role models? Do you have anyone that you think, yeah, I'll emulate what they did because they've done it?
I have many role models. In fact, so many of the people that I meet in life become my role models. And I would say my role models are the people who teach me how to step into courage, how to take one brave step, to just start something new and take a risk and
Mm,
do something that seems totally off the trodden track, but step into that courage. And the number one person who exemplifies that for me is my mom.
mm.
And she is just she is the person who's always saying, take that step. If it feels right, go for it. What's the worst
Yes,
that
that
can
can
happen?
happen.
Yeah, and that's kind of always been her motto. So she's my kind of, I would say, my first role model. And then I've been so fortunate to be brought up in a family of incredibly strong women and powerful women who have kind of all carved their own paths. And so I've been all of my aunties, like they just are just so incredible and so strong and so courageous, and they really lead with that. And so I would say, yeah, them for sure, my role models. And and my dad, you can't have, it's amazing to be surrounded by strong women. And as we said, bringing men into the conversation is such an important part of having transformative impact. And my dad has always been the person ready to jump into that conversation and ready to have these conversations. And so, he really is up there as well. And then I
Oh,
know there are all of these just incredible women in the world. And I just wanted to honor my family and the kind of my ancestors who have been so brave and so courageous and taken so many incredible risks.
Anjali, so what will success look like for you and for your organization? What is the power of we?
Yeah, success will look like even one woman feeling that they can come forward and share their story. Success will look like organizations collaborating with each other on things that they had never collaborated with each other on before. Success will look like stories from hidden and invisible corners of the world being amplified on global stages.
So tell us a little bit what the time frame is, Anjali. So plans and goals for the rest of the year, for the coming year.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, this year our Survivors to Summit fundraising peak is Mount Vinson in Antarctica. And that is kind of kicking off the next 3 years of lots of mountain climbing, lots of fundraising, and lots of coalition building and connecting with organizations around the world. The goal from a mountaineering perspective is to climb Mount Everest as our final peak in 2028, and then bringing a summit together of all of these organizations and partners and incredible advocates we've met over the next 3 years to the kind of last summit in Australia, which is a wonderful 2 hour, paved hike to the top of Mount Kosciuszko, and having that be kind of this in-person gathering to kick off the phase of really doing the work and building the global digital hub. So in the next 3 years, from a global digital hub perspective, we're going to be building the minimum viable product, the MVP, and we're going to be starting to pitch that out to be able to get the funding to do the full build. And so that will likely take the next 3 years to kind of get to the MVP and pitch for the funding, and then we will kind of move into another 2, 3 year phase of them building that technology alongside all of the partners that we will spend the next 3 years gathering.
Anjali is amazing. So, what takeaways would you like our listeners to have from your story, from listening to your story?
You said it before, but I think it's important to repeat, is you are stronger than you ever thought you were capable of. And you are enough. And if you follow your heart and take one step, one foot in front of the other, one step at a time, you can reach any summit in this world.
Anjali, I'm so grateful for everything that you are and everything that you do, for being so courageous and looking fear into the eye, both from a physical perspective, a mental perspective, an emotional perspective, for overcoming trauma that you have had to experience to then provide an incredible global hub for others that will bring so much change to the sexual abuse landscape and gender-based violence.
Thank you. Thank you so much.